Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Stigma Stompers, NAMI Erie County PA's one and only podcast. I am one of your hosts, Abby.
And I'm your other host, Heather.
Today, we are talking all things with problem gambling, mental health, and recovery with Josh Ercole, the Executive Director of the Council on Compulsive Gambling of Pennsylvania. So thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
No problem. So for anyone who may not be familiar with you and the Council on Compulsive Gambling, can you tell us about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So the council is basically a statewide nonprofit advocacy group. And the very short description is our main goal and mission is to help people who are struggling with a gambling issue. That's kind of where we all started. We've been around for about 40 years now. Yeah. And over the course of the past 40 years, we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot change. We've seen a lot develop. We've seen a lot of shifts in the way folks are gambling and exhibiting problems. So we've really kind of expanded our mission to work more rather than just focusing on helping people who are struggling. We try to prevent situations from happening where people develop problems. And then, unfortunately, if they do develop problems, we also want to be there with resources. And the primary thing that we do in Pennsylvania is oversee the helpline number, the 1-800-GAMBLER number. And this is a 24/7 link to help. So if someone's struggling, if someone's looking for more information, if it's a family member of someone, they can call the number or they can go to our website where we have a chat and a text link, and they can contact the helpline in a few different ways. And again, it's a 24-hour helpline. It's completely anonymous. It's free. And what will happen is there'll be a conversation, and that caller is going to be put in touch with the most appropriate resources for them. So if someone from Erie's calling, they might find information about a counselor in Erie or a meeting in Erie. Cool. Or maybe if they prefer, we have virtual services we could connect somebody with. So, I mean, we actually do have folks from Erie who end up working with folks who are treating situations outside of Harrisburg or Philadelphia or wherever. So over the years, again, things have really grown and expanded quite a bit. But going back to that primary mission, again, we just want to make sure that folks understand that, gambling isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's an activity. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some folks, through the participation and the ways that they participate, they develop an unhealthy relationship. And we want to make sure that folks know about the risks that are inherent in gambling games and how to prevent them from getting out of control. Mm-hmm. There are safer ways to approach it. And if you take a few steps to kind of identify what those safer ways are, you can really help to prevent a problem from starting. But if you find that things have gotten a little bit out of control, help is available. And that helpline number, it's a great avenue to kind of start.
This is kind of like a field where you really have to be passionate about it. What inspired you to go into this and to want to help problem gamblers?
Yeah, so there are quite a few of us, either folks who are in the field because they have their own lived experience or because someone else that they knew, maybe a friend or family member, was struggling at some point. My father-in-law was in recovery for 39 years. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2018. But at that point, he had 39 years of recovery with no gambling.
Wow,
and he was actually one of the founders of the council back in the mid-'80s. He and a few other folks, they kind of got together and thought, we can do something here. And over the years, we've just kind of seen that grow. And I joined the council, I guess about 15 years or so ago. Okay. And in that time, we've kind of, again, seen a lot of expansion and a lot of shifts. And I've had the fortunate position of director of the council since he passed away. And, it's really, it's a position that goes much beyond, much further than just being a job. There's a drive and a motivation that's just always there. And even though he's not here anymore, I do think on a daily basis, what would Jim do? How does that work? Mm-hmm. Is it is it a good step that I'm taking? Is it a mistake? Should I look at it from a different lens? And it's kind of good just always having that guidance. This whole thing was really built upon.
Yeah, I love that.
You mentioned it a little bit. The gambling landscape has changed a lot, especially in the age of technology. Can you kind of talk about some of the things you're seeing across Pennsylvania or even nationwide?
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's we see a lot in a lot of different ways. You know, and nothing about this. It's very easy to say like gambling or gambling problem or, you know, like if you need help, right? But it's so much more complex than just putting a title or using a phrase. Gambling and all of its different ways that it's expanded, that's a really good spot. And that's an important thing to talk about because there's a lot of types of activities that are out there that a lot of folks don't necessarily recognize as gambling. You know, you might have someone say, well, yeah, I know if you go into a casino or if you're betting on a horse race, you're gambling. But I buy lottery tickets every day, and I don't gamble, right? I'm doing my social good, right? I'm helping older Pennsylvanians, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of ways that really can kind of become very staticky. And that's what we try to do is sort of clear out some of that fog for folks and really kind of break it down into simple definitions. You know, if you're putting something of value at risk with the hope of winning something in return, but risking losing that money or that item or that feeling, whatever it is, time, relationship, anything, that's what we really want to make sure is that from the start we're talking about what kind of falls under what we would recognize as gambling or at least, you know, adjacent to gambling type activities, because there's so many things that people are participating in. You know, today we've got all these different legal battles between skill games and prediction markets and all of these kind of gray area forms of activities that a lot of folks may interpret as gambling or maybe not because of the ways that, you know, they're being guided by legislators or the media or whatever it is. And I think when you don't necessarily even recognize from the beginning what an activity is, you're not likely to put in any of those safeguards. You're not likely to put any of those preventive measures. And before long, you might start to find yourself going down, you know, a slippery slope.
Yeah, I feel like something I'm seeing a ton of right now is Pokemon cards. Like it's a gamble on if your money is going to get you the card that you're looking for. And people are even selling the cards. So they're hoping that their investment in buying the pack and they rip the pack and get like a rare card that they can get more money from it. So I feel like even something as simple as Pokemon cards, people don't even realize like they're participating in it.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. That's a great point. And, you know, there are groups out there that are looking at the connection between collecting and gambling, right? And, you know, when you use that definition I just talked about, you're kind of applying it to that same model, right? Yeah. Where you have an activity that includes some type of exchange of something, right? Money in most cases. Or the card, right, which might be that item of value, and you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important pieces is we have so many young folks who are impressionable, whose brains aren't fully developed yet, who are thinking about this next move, not what happens 2 or 3 down the road. And when you have young folks that are being put into positions like that and making those decisions, it's really normalizing the whole activity. So that by the time they do reach the legal age to go to a casino or to get their own account or whatever the case is, it's now something that they're already fluent in, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And a lot of times, though, that fluency doesn't include any type of education or awareness of some of the potential risks. And that's what we often see. So, you know, we talk about that kind of on a very broad strokes level, you know, not necessarily giving kids lottery tickets at holiday time or for a graduation, right?
Yeah.
It's something that, I mean, I grew up getting them from grandparents and, you know, I mean, it was a harmless gift and I feel confident knowing that they did not want me to develop a gambling problem, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes it just takes a little bit of having conversations and just recognizing again, oh, maybe that isn't the best approach. Maybe we should do something else. Yeah. And, you know, we see it. It's not just Pokemon. We see video games. We see, you know, obviously just exposure to sports betting on commercials and advertisements. And, you know, if you're watching a baseball game or a football game, it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to mute the game during commercials. Yeah. But now we have the broadcasters actually talking about it. And on the sidelines, there's advertisements for these different types of apps and platforms. And again, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing or that it shouldn't exist. It just requires a little bit extra effort and education on the the side of the viewer.
Yeah.
And nobody, I'm sure, goes into it thinking, oh, I'm going to be a problem gambler. It's just they're having fun. They might maybe, start off, maybe it's their 21st birthday. They go to the casino and they start gambling a little bit. When does it kind of cross the line to really be problem gambling?
Yeah, great point, right? I doubt there's anybody out there that says, today this is what I'm going to do, right? It typically doesn't happen that way. So I apologize in advance if I'm going to be a little bit too vague here. There's so much of this that's just so individual, right?
Yeah.
I would say the very short answer to that question is anytime we see somebody who's gambling where the gambling becomes potentially problematic or starts affecting their day-to-day life in a negative way, right? So like pretty safe, broad answer. And what I mean by that is it's not going to be I just spent the kids' college fund. It's not going to be I just took a second mortgage out on my house, or that's the result that happens further down the road. A lot of time the problem it might just start with somebody who says, well, last night we went to the casino with friends and they wanted to leave at 10 o'clock and I wasn't quite ready to. So I'm going to go back tonight by myself. And that way I don't have to leave. I'm on my own time.
Yeah.
Is that a problem? I don't think you can really assign that, okay, they have a gambling problem because they did that. And that might be the only time they ever do it.
Yeah.
But what if that's the first time? And what if that becomes their new trend, right? And again, I don't mean to say that going to a casino once or twice or 10 times in a month is a good or a bad thing. But every time you go, there's the greater likelihood that it becomes habitual. And that's one of the components. And once we start to see folks get into a position where maybe losses outweigh wins, or it doesn't even need to be financially related, sometimes it's just that preoccupation. If somebody's at work and they're thinking about, I can't wait to get home to, log into my account, or I can't wait to get to lunch so that I can log, like everything else starts to kind of lose value.
It's probably not fun
secondary
anymore, too. Like I noticed with sports, when it used to be like we just watched the Steeler games and we'd really get into it. And then it was like we had to watch everything because, I had some family members that were betting on different sports. So it was like we had to watch everything, and they'd even root against their favorite team just because they had a bet against them. So it almost made it, like they said, it's not even really as fun because you're constantly thinking, am I going to lose money on this? And so it really changes even how watching sports can be. Or
it's absolutely mind-blowing what we've seen over the course of the past 7 or 8 years since sports betting became legal. And your point is absolutely right on. The fact that we now have folks that are watching sporting events completely differently than they were just a short time ago.
Yeah.
It's our director of training and education, Greg. He's got season tickets to Penn State, and he goes to the football games. And that's what he says. He said there's people there that he knows that have had season tickets for years.
Yeah.
And he's heard them in the last couple of years getting upset, even though Penn State's winning. They're not covering the spread, or they're not getting that in-play game or that in-play bet that they just put money on. It's not working out in their favor. And they're losing sight of what the actual game and what the original intention of going to the games was all about.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's there's this kind of shift that we're seeing where the game is actually becoming secondary and the betting is actually becoming the primary activity.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, especially from a mental health standpoint, how is that changing just the way that somebody is cognitively and emotionally and behaviorally attaching themselves to the activity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're really seeing, some of these shifts. It's not like, oh yeah, I took a pill or I smoked this joint or I drank this beverage,
right,
and something changed. It's so subtle and it's so fluid, and you never know when it's going to happen, right? Yeah. So you might have somebody that goes to the casino every week for years, and then something happens one day and it just shifts, and that's really sometimes what we see is it's not like, oh yeah, I went. I mean, certainly it happens where somebody goes, oh, that was the first time I went and it was great and I got to go back. But a lot of times we see people who've, gambled occasionally, recreationally, socially, and then all of a sudden at some point something just happens. They have a win that really kind of, it releases that dopamine. It feels good, and they want to try and do it again. Or maybe they have something in their life that happens. Maybe there's a traumatic event. Maybe they lose a partner or a child or a parent.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden going to the casino and sitting in front of a slot machine, wow, all of these different, these lights and bells and whistles, they feel differently than they ever did before. And I know I'm losing money, but, this is kind of like my medication. It's making me feel good. It's worth this investment, you know?
Yeah.
But obviously that's not sustainable. So, there's a lot that's really shifted.
Yeah. That's kind of a perfect segue into talking about gambling and mental health. How I feel like the two can affect each other, like mental health affecting gambling, but then gambling affecting your mental health. I feel like they could be the same but different. So can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah. That's always the question, right? Is, and I think a lot of times, it's one thing with substances. So we do see a lot of co-occurring situations, whether it be co-occurring substance and mental health and gambling, or mental health and gambling, or substances and gambling. The substances is kind of, that's easy to identify, right? They kind of started, and we assume that everything in their life was a problem as a result of that. Obviously, that's not the case in a lot of situations. And with gambling, because it's something that's so easy to hide, it's so, under the radar, because, we have, if you sit out in your car before you go into the office and you drink a bottle of bourbon, people are going to know.
Yeah.
You could be sitting in your car playing roulette for a half hour, and you walk into the office, nobody's going to have an idea.
No.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's really difficult to identify, the chicken or the egg, which one came first. And there are different pathways, and through assessment and working with different, counselors and kind of identifying things, sometimes that can come to the forefront. And we see a lot of situations where folks who have some type of pre-existing mental health condition, sometimes there's, antisocial disorder. Sometimes there's some type of neurobiological, situation that may be present. They kind of feel what I talked about before. They feel some kind of a euphoric state when they sit down and gamble. And some of the things that are, pushing them in a certain direction, or things that they're struggling with, sometimes that's clouded, it's numbed, and they kind of feel that, oh, this is the activity that I'm looking for. And then, you go a few months or a year down the road, and then there's a gambling problem. The other side, we see sometimes people just get into this world of gambling and they enjoy it, and then all of a sudden it starts to become a problem, and then that's where we see some of those mental health situations start to kind of creep in as a result. Because there's stress, there's anxiety, there's depression. On an average monthly basis, the highest, we ask questions at the helpline. When a caller calls in, we ask, are there any other situations that you're concerned with? Are there any other feelings that you're feeling? Are there any other activities that you feel like you're doing to excess that maybe we don't want to talk about? We certainly see alcohol and substances receive a fair share of calls, but anxiety and depression, they're always right at the top. And I think it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's what caused somebody to start gambling and led to the gambling problem, or if it's the result of the development of a gambling problem, there's going to be that overlap.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say once, rarely does anyone have a gambling problem. And, that's what they were meaning was just a gambling problem, and really it's something that doesn't live in a vacuum. But all too often, again, kind of going back to that complex assignment of a term, there's really so much more to consider, because there's likely something else going on.
Yeah, it's the same as people using substances. I mean, like, if a drink can numb your feelings and get you to stop thinking about, like, your depression or your situation at home in general, that's how people become alcoholics. It normally is they're trying to, like, numb something. I feel like it's the same way with gambling. If, like, pressing the button, just turning your brain off and watching the screen even. Sometimes I'm not an expert, but I feel like just the act of doing it, not even necessarily the money, just like a mind-numbing, like you press a button and don't have to think. I feel like just that could be addicting. So then add in the, winning a lot of money potential. Just, I think I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. One thing people don't talk about a lot too is there has to be a pretty high suicide risk. I can't imagine if maybe your family had no idea like that you were gambling and you had just lost like the house or, you know, lost that much money. Do you see that, you know, that there is some connection between problem gambling and suicide?
Yeah, unfortunately, most of the research that's done and available out there does show that we do see higher rates of suicide, suicide ideation, attempts, even completion across the board with gambling. And to your point, that's exactly one of the things that we often see is that there's this increased level of hopelessness. And not to say that everybody out there understands someone who's, you know, developing a substance use issue is going to kind of, you know, embrace it and understand it and accept it and do everything that they can with gambling. You know, there's nothing going into the body, right? So it's just a game.
Yeah.
Why would you do this? You're losing. Why have you done this to us? Why can't you just stop, right? It's a much different way that it's looked at. And that perception, that can have an effect on the individual who is struggling.
Definitely.
You know, to your point, I mean, what's happening in the brain is virtually identical, whether you look at it from gambling or from substances. The parts of the brain that light up when the activity or substance is introduced, even when, you know, we hear situations where people are driving to the casino where they're preparing to start gambling. And the feelings and emotions that they go through, there's that same effect. So it's not the money, it's not the outcome.
Yeah.
It's not even entirely hitting that button. Sometimes it's just the preparation to do so. And we hear the same thing.
The possibility of becoming super rich.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of times what we find is that as the problems really start to intensify, that end goal of becoming rich, it really shifts because it's not about the money. It's maybe I want to win so that I can continue playing.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, or maybe so I can pay off debt, which is maybe the logical thought that's still there. But how many times do you think that if somebody does hit that jackpot, that money is going to go towards paying off a debt, right? In very few situations. Yeah. And I think that's another piece that really makes this so important to talk about is, you know, say we have somebody who's struggling with a substance use issue and a mental health issue. Yeah. Typically, the substance use piece is going to be pretty linear in terms of a downward progression. With gambling, you're going to have those intermittent wins. You're going to have those jackpots. You know, I mean, that's if somebody's doing it a lot, and I don't mean to say that the jackpot's going to outweigh the losses, but the jackpots are going to serve as a temporary break in that depression, right? And all of a sudden, things are good.
And those are probably the things they remember are all the wins. They probably forget about how much they've lost, but like those wins, like, wow, I went on a whole vacation. I took my family on a vacation, or we bought this boat because of it. But yeah, sometimes the downside.
And you know, what you just said is important too. Not only is it the person and the way they're interpreting it, what about the family, right? All of a sudden, mom or dad comes home with money or gifts or takes us on a vacation. They're the hero. Right. So the behavior is enforced and or reinforced rather, because now it's like, oh, that was great. You know, maybe if you win again, we can go somewhere else, right?
Yeah, like if your kid was like, wow, Dad, this was the best day of my life because you got to go to Disney or whatever.
Sure.
Like
riding
that high, like
right.
I would love to hear that all the time.
Go out and win some more money.
Yeah. Like
and it's not that easy.
I feel like there's things that give you that like rush too that are positive behaviors that can turn negative, but like just like the runner's high does like the same thing.
Sure.
So it spans so many different things. I just think it's
so
very
many.
interesting.
Yeah.
But we kind of talked about sports betting a little bit and how people are just not even enjoying watching sports anymore because they're losing money. But gambling and those kinds of activities are becoming so much easier access through smartphones and social media influence and influencers online literally promoting like gambling apps. So have you seen an increase in teens and young adults using the apps, and what do those look like compared to like what do the different age groups look like with usage?
That's a really important question and one that continues to kind of generate more discussion, which is a good thing. Over the last 7 or 8 years since we've seen sports betting become legal and available, we have seen a consistent increase and a shift and an increase in the number of calls from younger folks. Typically what used to be more of a middle-aged reporting demographic, we now have a good 10 to 15 years younger. On average, it represents the highest volume. And when you go a little bit younger than that, even though we don't have the highest numbers overall, what we are seeing is an exponential increase percentage-wise in just how many folks are calling. And I think that's really important because, you know, when you have these newer forms of gambling that are very technological, they're very attractive to younger folks. You know, that's we don't see younger folks going into casinos, right? And part of that is because there's age requirements that they don't meet. But another part of that is, you know, when they turn 21, typically we're not going to see that either. You know, we're not seeing phones being used as phones anymore, right? There's that online connection that so many of us have. And that creates a very easy access point when you have a platform that allows you to do those same types of activities and you can walk around with it in your pocket, access it 24/7, right? Like there's no break, there's no end, like there's no boss to beat and then you've won the game, right? You can play a slot machine eternally. You can bet on sports eternally. You know, even, you know, with you know, games that are played here, you know, if you have Major League Baseball or the NFL, you know, there's games being played at every hour of every day around the world, right? So, and we have those apps, regulated and unregulated, they have those games, you know, so there is the ability to bet on a table tennis match that's happening in Croatia, right? And I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine that most people in the United States, they're placing wagers on that table tennis match. They don't know anything about either player, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like it's this confidence that, okay, I've done my research and I feel that this is a situation where this player is going to play better, or, you know, that this is the underdog and they're going to come back. It's all about the thrill. It's staying in action. And that's what we find is that at the same time that these types of situations are being participated in, the companies that have them, they're aware of this, right? So, you know, that's where we ask for everyone's input here and, like, you know, let's take that responsibility so that it doesn't all fall on the shoulders of a person who's now struggling. You know, I think everybody pretty much knows that if I start gambling, I should probably do it in a responsible manner. But the fact of the matter is there's a lot of folks out there that, you know, whether it's because they don't know of the risks or they don't identify them or they simply can't. And that's where we've got the ability to really intervene, and I think that's such an important piece. So, you know, obviously in Pennsylvania, the state benefits with tax revenue. You know, the legislators play a role in assigning the different legislative bills and laws that allow for these types of games. The operators, they certainly have the technology to do a lot, and the regulators oversee those industry members. I think them, along with families and individuals, this needs to be a much more concerted effort, you know, and really looked at as more of a public health approach rather than just assigning a tagline saying gamble responsibly. We all need to have more conversations. And that's why having the opportunity to do something like this today is so great because, you know, my hope is that someone hears it and listens to what we're talking about and recognizes, oh yeah, I guess that is something that could happen, right? Because all too often we find that gambling is the one that sort of like falls, it's like brushed into the corner, right? We don't see it. And over the course of the last few years, that's certainly increased, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
One thing, like, I feel like too is sometimes it's really normalized in family with like fantasy football. Like, let's get a fantasy football league, and you get the whole family and you get kids involved. Is that something that could be like a danger, starting your kids doing something like that? I mean, they probably just think, oh, this is innocent. We'll do this, you know, between cousins, and my kids have done that in our family. But that could, I'm sure, be kind of dangerous.
It's the same idea, right? Like fantasy sports right now, fantasy contests, that is one of the legislated forms of gambling available in Pennsylvania at casinos and online. And that's the thing is, if you're doing it in a way that is putting someone who's younger, exposing them to it, it has that potential. Again, not necessarily to say that any child that scratches a lottery ticket or plays in a fantasy contest is doomed. They're bound to develop a problem. Not at all. But the likelihood there is increased. And it's not to say that it's something that's done with any ill intent or even that it's a mistake.
Right.
But it's the important piece is having that education along with it.
Yeah.
So that, if we think it's probably a good idea for kids not to participate in some games like that. But there's so many games.
I
What
know.
about like Chuck E. Cheese and Dave and Buster's and some
Yeah.
of those, going to a carnival, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have those games where, they're based on skill, but we have, poker's based on skill.
Yeah.
Blackjack is based on skill, right? There's still that exchange.
Gray area between
Sure.
kind of what is a game and what is gambling and dangerous. Yeah.
I think the important piece with it is not to look so much at the, is there money exchanged? Is it a lot of money? Is it something where, is it better to do a season-long fantasy event versus a daily fantasy event, which is much faster paced and it has the potential to really increase involvement and potentially lose more money?
Yeah.
It's what behaviors is the activity generating?
Yeah.
What emotions, what feelings are we seeing someone who's engaging in an activity like that going through?
Yeah.
And that's the really important piece, because it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? When we talk about it, is somebody who scratched off 5 lottery tickets versus 1, it's how that relationship with the activity started and how it's growing or not growing, and how does it, where is it going, what direction? And not to mention, what other environmental factors are playing a role.
Yeah.
So when we look at it, it's difficult to assign, this should or shouldn't happen, or this is or isn't a good thing.
Right.
It's really much more of an overall community and environmental conversation to have. Yeah. And, when we look at activities like that, it's a very normalized part of growing up. And a lot of us were exposed to it and did participate in things like that.
Yeah.
But it's about having those conversations so that we can hopefully help people stay in a place that's safe rather than escalate into a problematic area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into recovery and treatment. So if someone is struggling with a gambling addiction, what does treatment and recovery look like for them, and what kind of resources are available in Pennsylvania to get them started?
Sure. Yeah, it's that's a great question, really important. In Pennsylvania, we're fortunate because of the way that the legislation was outlined. There is actually a fund that goes towards all treatment and prevention. It's not a taxpayer fund. That comes from the gambling industry, ironically enough. So when all of the licenses were assigned and the legislation was all outlined, that included a minimum amount or a percentage of annual revenue that goes directly into this fund. And the fund is overseen by the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs in Pennsylvania. And folks have the ability to become certified as gambling counselors. They actually go through training and go through a process to actually achieve that certification.
Yeah.
And if they want to, they can enter into a contract with the department, and they'll be able to see folks who are struggling with gambling problems or family members at no cost to the individual. So the state will basically reimburse that person if they don't have insurance or the financial means to cover the cost of treatment, which is
good to
great.
know, yeah.
That's all outpatient. There's no inpatient, unfortunately, that's covered state funded in Pennsylvania. But I honestly, there's really only a very few, even across the country, residential inpatient specific gambling treatment programs. So that sometimes becomes a challenge and something that we continue to kind of advocate for and work on. But the other big piece, there's a lot of folks out there that call us and say, well, I don't want to sit across the desk from someone. That doesn't feel comfortable to me. What else do you have? We also have meetings. There's a lot of recovery groups. So similar to AA and NA for folks that are struggling with substances, we have GA.
12 steps and yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, 12-step program. And there's other programs outside of the GA program that are not 12-step based, things like Smart Recovery. There's other different options. And a lot of them, one of those inadvertent benefits of the pandemic, we have so many virtual options now. So, where we used to have to really kind of get creative to connect someone with a meeting, we now have the ability to connect them with meetings all across the state and even around the country and around the world.
That's great.
We have folks that have, logged on at 2 a.m. to an Australian GA meeting or a meeting that's going on in Great Britain, and they're able to access what they need at the time that they need it. And quite frankly, 10 years ago, that just didn't exist.
Yeah.
So
Probably
it's
really
good that
helps
we're
them
seeing
feel like they're not alone too. When
Yeah.
they join a group like that and they see, wow, it's not just me, because sometimes they probably think, because you kind of hide it, and seeing all those people has to be helpful, that you're all on this journey together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest components. I think it was Johann Hari who said that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah.
And I think that's so
Yeah,
powerful, right?
that is so
that's
powerful.
what so many people are looking for
Yep.
and what they need. And it can be such a huge piece.
Yeah.
What we've seen with gambling, again, because there's not that chemical, that component, a lot of times it's all based on urges and feelings and emotions and drivers. And sometimes they can be very fleeting.
Right.
The problem is, if someone's not able to necessarily identify them or come up with strategies or ways to maybe kind of ride them out, they're very quick to act. And that's where we sometimes see those issues. So if someone has some of those tools in their tool belt, they might be able to say, okay, I know this feeling. I can identify why I'm feeling it. I can identify what made me feel it.
Yeah.
And I know what to do now. And I can call someone. I can log into a meeting. And in a half hour, I'm going to feel better. And I won't necessarily feel like I want to log into that app or go to that casino or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important is helping people identify. Abby, you asked about what does recovery look like. It looks very similar to what we see with other things. And in a lot of ways, this can be something that happens very quickly. There might be those, the financial situations that may take time to correct and to recover from. But as far as the cognitive distortions, as far as the understanding, not to say that somebody can get to a point where they can, in a healthy way, gamble again. This is something that likely will be with them for the rest of their lives. But they can help. They can in a very healthy way figure out ways to navigate around that, and they can live a life much like my father-in-law, in a very sober, so to speak, way by not feeling those same urges and not feeling those same triggers. And if you do, you identify them and know what to do.
What about like family support? Let's say they do want to go and they want to get the help that they need and they're doing everything right, but there's probably a lot that goes on with the family. Sometimes they might be upset because of the money they lost or whatever. And I know like with alcoholism, you can go to like Al-Anon and kind of learn how you can best support that person. What are some ways that family members can support a loved one who's struggling with gambling addiction?
Very much like GA having that AA alternative. There's also Gam-Anon meetings as well, both in person as well as online. And we find that the more that someone who is a family member can learn about this disorder and help to be kind of part of the solution, it can be so effective. It can be so powerful. And that's what we often talk to folks, because we do get those phone calls from family members. We get the phone calls that they struggle to identify and understand why can't you just stop this?
Yeah.
Like, you see the turmoil it's putting us all through. Excuse me. But you continue doing it. And a lot of times helping them understand that this isn't something that they're doing by choice.
Right.
This isn't something that they're doing because it's fun. It's because the way that their brain is relating to it, they literally cannot control it. And as we see, folks who start to learn and identify and maybe talk to others, again, that connection piece, they feel like they're not alone. They can navigate it. And there's still, there's still anger and there's still frustration.
Yeah.
There's still moments. And we're all human.
Right.
But it helps them kind of create a system as well. And it helps them better identify, okay, this is something that now we can talk about. And we often talk about, it sounds silly, but, we kind of try to identify a gambling problem as a thing, as like a living, breathing thing. And we can either say, you did this to us, you created these problems to the individual who's struggling. Or we can remove that gambling problem from them, and we collectively as a family, we can throw that in the corner and we can all fight it together. And sometimes just that perspective shift, it can be really helpful, and it can be powerful in helping them identify that, this is still the brother or sister that I grew up with. This is still the husband or wife that I married, right? And that connection, again, that can really kind of create a very unique situation where now for so long we had an us against them situation, and
So
now
true.
it's all of us against this thing.
That makes
And
sense.
not always perfect, right? It's
Yeah.
not always going to be something that right, we all have good days and bad days, but it's about recognizing that any setback, any anger, even if it's a situation, and if, say, somebody is very honest and says, I have an urge to log into an app, I have an urge to go to a casino,
Yeah.
at least then we can work with something, we can talk about it. If that's hidden and you just do it, or if it's hidden and you're not talking about it, that's where we're going to see some of those stresses really start to amplify. So, identifying that we are all human and we all do, go through ups and downs in life.
Yeah.
We're not perfect, and nobody's expecting us to be. That can really kind of take some of the pressure off. And a lot of times when we get calls, I mean, you can imagine that,
Oh, yeah.
the pressure and the anger it's at the apex of the conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
So that can take some time just to get through as well.
Yeah, connection is so unbelievably important for all kinds of recovery, gambling, substance, mental health. We had done a podcast episode with someone that worked at Glen Bay, which is they do dual diagnosis substance misuse mostly, and they have an entire program that incorporates the family into the recovery plan. So they come into the meetings, and whether it's inpatient or outpatient, I don't want to get that wrong. Can't remember which one it is. I would assume both, but they literally have the families come into the facility and go to peer support groups with them. And so they can kind of facilitate, like, what you did hurt me, like, when you were on this substance or whatever. And, like, they can apologize and make amends then, but then the family can also learn about the disease that overcame their brain and, like, why they were acting that way. So it gets closure on both ends. And he even said that those people had the most success with their recovery because they had the support at home from their family members, and they didn't feel as though they were being judged for it. Since everyone was on the same page and was understanding. So, same for gambling. I think the family component is so important. So if you're dealing with the addiction of gambling, involve your family. I feel like it's probably, like, embarrassing or hard to talk about, or they're going to be mad at me, or, like, they have burned their family before with like stealing, or I don't even know, like, losing a job or whatever because of the addiction. But if you just communicate that with them, which is easier said than done.
Sure.
Way easier said
Totally.
than done.
Totally.
And same on the family end, though, too. I mean, being burned by the same person, it gets old. Believe me. Again, easier said than done to, like, forgive. But just open-mindedness, I think, is important, because connection really is, like, a huge component to recovery.
Absolutely. It's, sometimes, I mean, that's the thing. Again, none of us are perfect in that we might make mistakes, but also, like, we're not always going to accept things the same way, right?
Yeah.
We're not always going to feel the same way. And, that stigma and embarrassment that's associated with this is huge. But if we can plant that seed that this is okay to talk about, this is something that we're trying to work with you on, even if we get from to a point where, okay, well, I tell you half of the time, or I'm open with you half of the time, right? Like, today, I'm not open with you at all, right? So, a lot of times we kind of hear people say, well, I feel like I'm taking one step forward and two back.
Yeah.
Well, yesterday you were taking three back. So, like, let's look at the successes that you have here. Let's look at the positive side. And maybe, in a week or a month or whatever, maybe you'll be taking two forward and one back. And that's going to feel a lot better, and it's all a process. So, sometimes when we try to address this, whether it's family members or, or individuals, we have resources, right? We have a lot on our website, at the helpline center. They're not always going to be a good fit, right? So, like, we've got counselors. You might say, I would like to talk to a counselor, and we might refer you to a counselor. But we're going to say, if this doesn't work, please don't throw your hands up and give it, just give up. Like, it might take a few times. And, we might not find option A was what worked, but we'll look at option B and C, and we'll go as far into the alphabet as we need to.
Yeah.
And hopefully not that far, right? And I tell people that a lot when we hang up, and, kind of like to keep it light at the end, is I hope this is the last time that we talk, because that'll mean you found the help that works for you.
Yeah.
But if it's not right, call me back, and we'll go through it. We'll figure it out until we find a good fit.
Even just with therapists, I think sometimes
just
people,
gonna say that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you'll go to a therapist and you really have to connect with that therapist.
Oh, 100%.
And sometimes it's not there. It might not mean there might not be a bad therapist. They might be great, but they're not your therapist. Yep. So like for me, it took me 5 therapists before I really found somebody that I connected to.
Yeah.
So, that's another
Same with
thing.
like medications. Like if you're getting a medication for depression, there's so many antidepressants out there. So if you tried one and it didn't go well, don't give up on them. If medication is what you need, some people don't need meds, but if that's the path that you need to be on, try different ones.
Yeah, lots
there's
of
like
trial and
so
error.
many. There's so many options. I don't even think people know.
And that's the thing, right? Like you could either say, okay, this doesn't work or it doesn't feel good or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to try something else, and we stay in a very positive space. But if you say, they gave me a meeting to go to and I went and I didn't connect with anybody, this is dumb. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Then all progress is
Yeah.
immediately halted, right? So that's really the important piece, is just trying to connect and figure out, okay, look, this is now a relationship that we have, and we're going to stay in this relationship and get you where you need to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, not always the most successful situation, but we really want to relay that message that this isn't a one and done phone call. Like we'll stay with you and guide you and help you through the process so that you get to a point where you don't need us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we wrap up, what is the one message that you hope listeners take away from today's conversation about problem gambling? And is there anything that we haven't discussed yet that you think would be important for people to know?
So I guess one thing we often find is that, we kind of touched on a lot, right? We touched on a lot of this piece. I think it's really important to understand that anybody who gambles is at risk of developing a problem, right?
Yeah.
If you gamble once, that could be the time.
Yeah.
And any time you do it after, just be aware. It's not a judgment on your character. It's not a moral flaw. It's not a weakness. It's simply the way that your brain chemistry is relating to the activity. It puts you in a position where that dopamine feels just a little bit different than it does for you, than it does for someone else who's not struggling.
Right.
And that person who's not struggling, again, you never know. That might be the time that they start to feel those same feels. Yeah. So if you feel that, identify it, embrace it. Don't run and hide from it, but just recognize, okay, maybe this is something that I should talk about. And understand that there are tools out there. The helpline is a great resource simply because it's easy to remember. It's 24 hours a day, and it's free. And you can connect with folks to get information about those resources. Our website, pacouncil.com. We have most of the resources that are available at the helpline. We have them downloadable on the helpline on the website, and there's a lot of information about podcasts. There's information about online meetings. There's downloadable cards that you can get, books that you can download. You can just read about what is this thing that I'm struggling with, and what are these initial days going to look like. And that's great not only for the individual, sometimes it's great for their families to read about too, and they can all be on the same page, they can connect and do it together. I would say the biggest thing is most situations we don't see the problems just get better.
Right.
We don't see them go away.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of effort that's required, but we can make it as comfortable and as seamless as possible. So that if you are to call this number and you are to start that process, be honest with us. If you say, you know what, I don't want to talk to a counselor, then we're not going to assign you with a counselor, right? There's enough discomfort already.
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to try to minimize that and make this path as seamless and as smooth as possible for you. And you're going to have ups and downs along the way, and that's okay. We all do.
Yeah.
So it's really just about figuring out how am I going to approach this and what plan am I going to put together that's going to work for me. And I think that's a big piece is you can't walk a mile in someone else's shoes, right?
Yeah,
So true.
recovery is entirely too individualized.
Entirely.
Yes,
So
it's
you're
not
going to hear
always
that.
linear.
It's
It's
You're going to hear,
very-
here's what you need to do. Here's
Yeah.
what you have to do. The only thing you have to do is what you have to do. It's,
Yes.
it's what works for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important piece. So, when we hear folks who say, oh, geez, I have a problem, I don't know where to turn. Like, oh, It's so hard to hear, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of work to do to educate people across the state and around the country that there are helpline services. In Pennsylvania, again, if you call 1-800-GAMBLER or you visit our website, you're taking a huge step in a very positive direction to getting that help that you need. If there's anything that we can ever do or answer, or if there's any information that we can provide, my cell phone is on the website. So,
wow.
call me. I'm very accessible, and, we'll talk. But anything that we can do to help an individual or a family member, that's really our drive and mission.
Our final question for you was resources, if people need them. So can you say the number again and give your website and
Absolutely.
anything else you think would be helpful for anyone?
Yeah, I would say most of the things that we talk about or talked about even today, between meetings, online and in person, podcasts, different types of downloadable items, certainly counselors and other forms of recovery-based connection, calling 1-800-GAMBLER, or by visiting our website, which is pacouncil.com. That's PACOUNCIL.com. They're both 24/7. They're both free to access, and we keep them up to date. So there's updated lists of counselors. There's updated meeting access points. We're constantly kind of going through each page and just making sure that it's as robust and helpful as possible. But it is a living, breathing, organic website, and we do try to keep it as up to date as possible with resources that are relevant and effective.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for coming on
Thank
and
you.
for giving the resources and
all
for the
that you
work you do.
Yeah, it's amazing.
No, thank you
It's
both
very
as well.
important.
No, I really appreciate the time, and it was great to be here. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for watching or listening, whatever platform you're on. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, and thank you again for watching this episode of Stigma Stompers.
If you'd like more information about NAMI, you can check us out on our website, NAMIErie.org, and you can also check us out on our socials. Facebook, we have an Instagram, and we also have a LinkedIn.
And while you're on our website, you should go ahead and check out our t-shirt store. We get a portion of all the proceeds. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.